Justine is in a situation with fire alarm. You know, you can tell things are reopening because we're all in various states of disarray. So if you would just go ahead and hit record, just because I know a lot of folks like to be able to come and to learn about this and to watch the replay as they're going about their house. So I'm not Justine, I'm Grace Whiting. I'm the president and CEO of the National Alliance for Caregiving. And Justine Spear is our fund and member development associate. She has just joined the team recently over the last couple of months and is working with us on really helping to build out our membership program. Unfortunately, right now, Justine is having a fire alarm and had to step away from her computer, which is why you're seeing me. I know we have a smaller group here, and before I hand things off to Donna and Laurel to talk us through the two pieces of today's discussion, I'm wondering if folks just want to say a quick hello and introduce themselves. And I'm going to look at my Hollywood squares here and ask Jasmine if you want to introduce yourself first.
Thank you, Grace, and I'm very excited about this. Jasmine Greenemeyer with EMD Serrano, and I oversee our Embracing Cares initiative, where we're very fortunate that the National Alliance for Caregiving is a part of that effort. And also I oversee our global Healthy Women, Healthy Economies initiative. So obviously this is of keen interest.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jasmine. Kathy, would you like to say hi and introduce yourself?
I would. Hi, everyone. I'm Kathy Jackson, Senior Director of Advocacy at Mallinckrodt. So good to see some familiar faces. And I oversee the advocacy with many of our partners across all of our therapeutic areas and have worked with Grace for many years.
Robert, would you like to introduce yourself to the group?
Sure. Hopefully I'm off mute and you all can hear me say my name is Robert Goldstein and I am at Biogen. I work primarily with our SMA franchise here in the US, but I'm bringing back all of these learnings for all of my colleagues across all of our treatment areas. So thanks for arranging this conversation. Look forward to hearing more.
Absolutely.
And we haven't had any cicadas up here yet, but I'm looking forward to it.
It's like we've had enough of like plagues and pestilence for a lifetime.
Yeah, there you go. Yep.
To live without the cicadas. Pat Noby, do you want to say hi to the group?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Hi, Grace. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm Pat Noby. I'm a disability policy engagement director and do a lot of work on caregiving.
We're not hearing her.
Pat, I think it cut out there for a second.
Yeah, my laptop does not like Zoom. Every other platform is fine. Zoom is an issue. So I'm with Anthem and do a lot of work with caregivers. Conversation today.
Great. So if in case y'all didn't hear, Pat is with Anthem. She's done a lot of work with caregivers and even did this amazing program where they created sort of caregiver baskets to kind of help families transition with that. So Rachel Grimm, would you like to say hi to the group and introduce yourself?
Yes, hi everyone. Thanks so much for having us today. I'm Rachel Grimm. I'm the Health Program Manager for Aging and Caregiving at the National Down Syndrome Society. So looking forward to learning all about what we have to talk about today, and how it applies on that national scale, especially for all types of caregivers.
Awesome. Colleen.
Hi, I am joined, my colleague Rachel just announced herself. I am Colleen. I work at the National Down Syndrome Society as the Senior Manager of Community Relations, and I work with our families and our local Down syndrome organizations across the country to make sure that they have the necessary resources. And of course, caregiving is very crucial to our community. So thank you all for having us here today.
Awesome. And Lara Proctor, do you want to say hi?
Yes, hello. Okay, hi everyone. My name is Lara Hines Proctor. I am the Director of Programs at the Women's Institute for a Secure Retirement, so a colleague of Laurel's. I'm really excited that that Wiser was invited to be part of this event today. Certainly working with caregivers, issues of financial caregiving are a big one that we've been working on for many years. So we're really excited to be here. I'm sure you'll hear more about Wiser in Laurel's introduction. So thanks.
Awesome. Well, I just want to say it's lovely to see all of your faces. I'm also glad to see that Justine is back and not on fire. So, you know, and I appreciate everybody hanging in there during COVID and all the complexities of that. So I'm going to hand things off to Justine to introduce our two speakers. I just want to mention that Donna at NACDD has done some awesome stuff around just improving the dignity and autonomy of people living with disabilities. And we had actually gone and spoke at an event that she did with our colleagues at Anthem a couple years back about caregiving and sort of that delicate balance between the person who has a disability and someone who's helping to care for them. And she also serves with me on a advisory board on Medicaid home and community-based service waiver design. So she's brilliant, and I got a chance to hear about this program a couple of weeks ago, and I was very excited to see if she could share it with us. And then likewise, I would just say Wiser is a longtime friend of NAC. Wiser is Wiser's executive director and CEO, Cindy Council, is on our board of directors and has been engaged with NAC for many years. And I say this without exaggeration that there really is no other organization that understands the challenges facing older women and particularly caregivers when it comes to managing finances. So very excited to hear both of these presentations. So Justine, I'm handing the baton to you. I'm going to go silent on this side, but glad you're alive and looking forward to the talks today.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Lauren and Grace, for taking over while the fire alarm in my building went off. It is very, very, very loud, so I had to step away for a moment. I want to do, Grace pretty much said it all, but we will be starting our discussion today with Donna Meltzer from NACDD, and she's going to give us a brief overview and description of all the excellent work they are doing with their Get Out the Vaccine program. She's got a lot of really great information on this program that she will be speaking about. And then Laurel Beadon from Wiser will be discussing how COVID-19 has impacted specifically women caregivers and what going back to work looks like for women caregivers. So with that, I will turn it over to Donna.
Thank you so much, Justine, and thank you, Grace, for such lovely words. And I'm so happy to be here today with all of you and to talk a little bit about what we're doing. I don't know if only I see this, but I see big kind of gray planks on my screen. And it looks like somebody's trying to solve that little problem, but I'm happy to talk around that. So thank you. And again, I'm with NACDD, the National Association of Councils on Developmental Disabilities. We are a national nonprofit, nonpartisan organization, and we exist in Washington, D.C., along with the Cicadas, and we represent our 56 state councils on developmental disabilities. We call them DD councils. So one in every state and most territories of our nation. And they have been in existence for over 50 years now, established really to look deeply within their states, to look at where there are gaps in systems that impact the lives of people who have intellectual and or developmental disabilities, and then to design solutions and look for ways to make communities operate better, to simplify systems like healthcare systems and education systems, transportation, housing, employment, et cetera, and find more ways to support people who have intellectual and developmental disabilities to live independently in the community. So as I said, we are located in Washington, D.C. We're very much a player and a partner with lots of other both disability organizations, caregiving organizations, and others. As Grace mentioned, she and I serve together on a national advisory board for United Healthcare on IDD, and it's been a tremendous opportunity as we've looked at caregiving issues. Grace mentioned a conference that she and I both spoke at a couple of years ago, and some other opportunities as well, where we've really been looking at what are the needs of people who are both professional caregivers, family caregivers, and we are here to support all of those, and thrilled with that work that we are able to do. So our duty councils receive federal funding to support those local programs and to really promote this agenda of independence and productivity for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. If I could have the next slide, please. For many people who have disabilities, their families or their caregivers may be feeling very anxious and unsure about the vaccine and its safety. I think we've all been sort of in this space. Hopefully all of those of us who are here today listening to this conversation are now fully vaccinated or on our way to getting there. If you're like me, you just couldn't wait for that opportunity because this whole year has been so difficult, so strange, and at times often very scary. And for people who have intellectual and developmental disabilities, definitely a very, very challenging year. We watched so many of the people who we support who had previously been highly engaged out in their communities, people who had jobs, people who were going to school, people who were able to see family and friends and go to the movies and go dancing and go shopping and all of those daily routine things. Everybody had to suddenly stop where they were and go indoors and wear masks and often feel very unsure about that. Going back in time, and I know this year feels like a complete blur and one very long, very bad day, but a year ago we were highly focused on lack of PPE, personal protective equipment, and very worried about the fact that support professionals who needed to come in and work with people who have IDD and their families, all of those caregivers needed that support to make sure that their safety was in place as well as the safety of their client and the client's family. So we really began a lot of work a year ago on that and ensuring that all caregivers were taken care of along with those individuals who have IDD and their family members. So once we really got into this space of vaccine becoming a reality, back in late December, I got a reach out from our colleagues over at United Healthcare, who Grace and I both work with, and they said, we have this idea. We think that you guys could really get engaged in a vaccine advocacy campaign. What do you think? And we said, absolutely. And so basically over the Christmas, New Year's holiday, we wrote a little proposal and put a plan together and said, we really need to address this hesitancy around the vaccine. At the beginning, there was a lot of hesitancy on behalf of all kinds of people, but certainly including people with IDD, including their caregivers, including their family members, around a multitude of reasons, right? Everything from, well, how could you create a vaccine so fast? How could this have happened? Feeling like almost overnight. And it felt maybe like that wasn't so secure. There was, of course, a lot of misinformation coming out about things like, oh, well, maybe I can get COVID-19 if I get this vaccine. We know that the intersectionality of people with IDD who also come from many different backgrounds, people who are Black, people who are Hispanic, people from indigenous populations, have a lot of their own cultural norms and mores, and that includes around healthcare and vaccine. And so we decided that this campaign had to really do a great job about getting out trusted facts, real scientific information And so we began very quickly in January, as soon as we were a go with this campaign. We met with our colleagues over at the CDC to talk about vetted information. What would some of those good facts be? And we decided it was time to roll. And first things first, we needed a name for our campaign, and we went with getoutthevaccine.org. You might notice it sounds a little bit familiar, right? GOTV in the past has really referred to get out the vote, but in this case, it's get out the vaccine. But we knew it was something that was a little bit familiar sounding to people, and particularly to people with disabilities. And it's something that's easy to remember. So we quickly developed a logo and a hashtag of GOT vaccine. It's also a little bit reminiscent of the Got Milk campaign, if you remember that one. We started putting all of this together. So if I could have the next slide, please. So we got our information together, and we developed a website. The website is getoutthevaccine.org. And what we did is we really developed a place that is very accessible, full of that scientific information, best practices information that came from many of our DD councils and many other national organizations, other organizations, and federal agencies as well. We include on that site information coming from the CDC and from the FDA and the NIH and Administration for Community Living and all of those other trusted sources and resources on vaccine. One of the things that's very important to us and the people that we represent is making sure that not only is the information that we share credible and scientifically based, but it's also available in easy to understand language. We call that plain language. Some people call it easy read, but we definitely make sure that our information is easy to read, easy to understand, wherever you are, whoever you are, that you are able to connect, get this information, and perhaps be connected back to other local people in your local communities to learn more about the vaccine. So getting the website up was our priority number one. We also started doing a couple of webinars. Our first webinar was really about getting information out from trusted resources. We did some surveying early on to better understand what messages or what messengers would really resonate best with people, whether they were a caregiver, they were a family member, they were a person with disability. Who did they want to hear from? And while, yes, there was a sprinkling of, we want to hear from medical professionals, we want to hear from people who are people who maybe are with our federal government or people working on vaccines. Number one answer, though, really was, we want to hear from people who look like us, who sound like us, who are like us. And so our very first webinar that we did included some leaders from our community who are from Black communities, Hispanic communities, medical professionals, and caregivers as well. And so we made sure that those who were attending our webinars were going to see people like themselves. Our second webinar actually was in collaboration with the National Alliance for Direct Support Professionals. I'm sure many of you on this call today are familiar with them as well. They represent loads of DSPs across the country and in other countries as well. We had one of our presenters was actually from Canada. That was an interesting perspective as well. But again, it was hearing from caregivers, people who are in and out of other people's homes on a daily basis, to talk about what helped them to say yes to the vaccine. And so we've gotten a lot of traction around this, and we are really learning through our campaign what messages work, what people want to hear, what they want to know. And our polling and information that we are gaining from our social media campaign is really giving us a lot of that feedback that's really important. So webinars has been a big part of this. And then there's the social media component. And if I could have the next slide, please. So here you can see what we have on our website. So you can see there's community voices. That's where you can see other people who are making comments and sharing information. We've got those resources that if you need to download something, you want to get a great resource that you can use in your work or in your community or with your family. We have that information. The video library has recordings of our webinars and some other videos that we have created and continue to create. And then the Share Your Shot, actually, we continuously invite people who want to do like a little framed photo of themselves as they've gotten their shot, that share their excitement and share what's important to them. And we have some blogs that are available. We are open to sharing more blogs. If anybody would like to be a guest blogger, we welcome you to reach out to us and let us know. And of course, we've got the social media through the hashtag #GotVaccine. We are using the social media to really get more voices and get people to talk about their experiences, their concerns, what's happening in their lives. We've of course gotten great news this past week with the Pfizer vaccine now being available for those ages 12 up to 17. We had already, conquered, of course, 17 and above. So that's really exciting. And so we are quickly working on getting a panel of youth voices together, young people with intellectual and developmental disabilities who will want to share with us some of their experiences around vaccine and being tweens and teens. So we're really excited about making that happen. I think I may have one more slide. Is that right? Oh, yep. So here's just some examples of what you'll see on our campaign website. You see Elizabeth Joseph and a little bit about her up in the upper left-hand corner. She is a native Alaskan. We have Emmanuel Jenkins, who is a professional worker at our DD Council in Delaware, but somebody who really struggled because of his Black culture around whether or not to get the vaccine. And he tells his story about getting there. And what you see in the lower left corner black box, we had a great conversation recently with two vaccine angels, Tarek Khan, who is a nurse practitioner in Philadelphia, along with an advocate from the Chinese American community in Philadelphia, who is just a rock star. And the two of them together have figured out that many people with IDD and other disabilities, or maybe are people who are elderly, but cannot leave their homes, needed vaccine to get to them. And so on that page, you can listen to and watch my conversation with them about how they managed to secure hundreds and hundreds of doses of vaccine. And literally every day after work, they jump in their cars and they go to people's homes. And not only do they vaccinate the individual with the disability, but their caregivers and their family members. So they are really extraordinary. And I highly recommend, if you've got 10 minutes and that's all you've got in a day, please listen to that and think about the work Tarek Khan and Anna Paring are doing, because they're extraordinary. Is there another slide there? So here are some of our links and ways that you can connect with us at NACDD and to our campaign. We're really proud of this work, but what we know is we still have a long way to go. We are still working really hard to help ensure that as many people as possible who have intellectual and developmental disabilities, along with their family members and their caregivers, can get the vaccine. We are absolutely thrilled that just a few short weeks ago, the CDC made funding available through the Administration for Community Living to go out to our disability programs across the country to do more work to help people get vaccine. This campaign is only a part of that, but so much work is going to be going on in every state now, really linking more people to the vaccine. Again, I welcome your thoughts, comments, and ideas. We're happy to help you get connected to our campaign, or really connect through the campaign by either blogging or being active on the social media piece or attending whatever webinars or events we host next. So thank you very much again for giving me an opportunity to talk about this, and look forward to some Q&A afterwards.
Donna, thank you so much. Can I just ask one question, which would be, what advice would you give to families that maybe haven't got the vaccine yet because they're worried or they're hesitant, and they're worried that the person that they're caring for, especially that person has a cognitive disability, maybe isn't comfortable, they don't know how to explain it, I guess. Any advice that you have would be great. And I know, Colleen, you shared a lot of information about Down syndrome folks. I don't know if you would want to weigh in on that as well.
So sure, yeah, I mean, look, we know that people still are hesitant. What we do know is that multiple studies have been done that have shown how effective the vaccine is. We know, and here's the bottom line, people are still going to, you can't change every single person's mind about what's bothering them. Our goal is to try to lead them to the facts. Just a couple hours ago, before this call today, I was at a meeting with pharma and meeting with some of their professionals who continue, medical professionals who continue to work on the trials and all of the scientific information coming out about the efficacy of this vaccine. And so one of the questions still was, what impacts have you seen on people who have disabilities? And they have said, so far, all of the evidence has shown that everybody who has gotten the vaccine remain healthy, remain strong. While we do know that not enough people were identified as people with disabilities in the trials, through the CDC, the data collection that comes back indicates that there were people who have disabilities, but most importantly, the fact that no adverse impacts are being reported. Again, we feel that if you're hesitant, the best thing to do is to talk to other people in your community. Talk with your trusted leaders. Talk with the folks from your schools, from your churches or your synagogues or mosques. Talk with those who you know, you respect, who are from your communities. Tribal leaders have been very impactful in numerous states. So, we just encourage people to follow the facts. Contact us if you have questions. We're happy to talk to you as well about any of these issues. But again, going back to that, that thing that we kept hearing over and over is, I will get the vaccine if I see and I hear that people I know, people who are like me, are getting it and they're okay. And so the more people who share those stories on our social media, we know that that will just spur more people to get the vaccine.
Absolutely. It's very, very community based. I mean, I'm not ashamed to admit that even in my own household, I made my husband get the vaccine first, made sure he didn't grow any scales, and then I was like, okay, I'll go next.
And right, we want to know that we're going to be okay. It is a little bit scary. Although what I think is interesting is that, in the past, many of us every year got our flu shot, and we had to get, our MMR and whatever other shots we would get before going off to school or giving them to our kids before they could go to school. And we didn't really question so much. We weren't asking questions like, well, did you get this variety, that variety, or that one? It was just went to your doctor's office and that was that. Which of course is why for the young folks, the 12 to 17 group, they are really trying to work with pediatrician offices and family practitioners to be the ones who will administer those shots rather than going, say, to the CVS or Walgreens or what have you. Because again, it's a trusted source. And when your pediatrician can look you in the eye and say, this is safe for your kid, we hope that will make it a little bit more palatable.
Thank you so much, Donna. I want to make sure that we get to hear from Laurel as well, but I'm hoping that if folks have questions, they can reach out to you through Wonderful, wonderful. And Colleen, I just want to thank you for sharing some of your perspectives in the chat. So I'm going to hand it back over to, and I just want to make one correction from earlier. So when I introduced Justine, I said she was our membership fund and development associate, but she actually got promoted yesterday to manager. So I don't know where the emoji is on my iPad, but imagine the little celebration emoji on my iPad for the wonderful work she's done in the last couple of months with NAC. So Justine, I'm going to hand it back over to you.
Thank you, Donna and Grace. So we will now hand it over to Laurel from Wiser, and then afterwards we will open the floor up for questions and discussion.
Justine, could I have my slides, please?
Ooh, there we go.
There we go. Oh, I guess my first, all right. I'm with Wiser, Women's Institute for Secure Retirement, and we are delighted to be here talking with you folks. We've had a long relationship with the National Alliance. Wiser provides women with basic tools and financial information aimed at helping them gain financial control. We also, along with the Administration on Aging, run the National Resource Center on Women and Retirement. It is a cooperation between the two organizations. At the end, there will be a page that will have all of the links to Wiser. We have information on saving and investing and financing caregiving and Social Security and how to choose a financial advisor. It really is on the ground, and Wiser is, I think, the only organization that focuses totally on being on the ground with women. Here are some things that you need to know about so that you can use them to make your financial life better. Well, what I'm going to talk about today is COVID and how COVID has had an effect on women and their work, and as we go forward in caregiving. But right off the top, in general, women earn less than men. We take more time away from work than men, generally for caregiving. We do part-time work, same reason. We have less in savings and pensions, generally because we have taken time away from work, or we do part-time work, or the type of work that we do. Often we are living alone in retirement because we live longer than men, and we just plain live longer. So may I have my next slide, please? What we know about women, work, and COVID-19. Well, no question about it. COVID has increased the burden of unpaid care. 4 times, oh, and before I go through these data, and I'm going to fire hose you with data, even though Wiser is an on-the-ground organization, data make doing the on-the-ground work easier because we know who to focus on, we know who's being affected. So I want to thank, not only do I do my own data work, but I want to thank, and the organizations are on each of the slides, the Kaiser Family Foundation, National Women's Law Center, the Washington Post, Pew, NAC itself, for some of these data that I have taken and put up here. So give all of these people kudos. 4 times as many women dropped out of the labor force in September 2020. That's roughly 865,000 women compared with 216,000 men. In other words, a whole lot more women left the labor force. By 2021, in February, it was 3 million women out of the labor force. Women, we know, and this is not just COVID, but with COVID, it accelerates it. Women are more likely than men to have to take time off for childcare. Why? Because childcare has gone away. Schools have closed. Someone has to be home with the children. 1 of 4 women who reported unemployment said it was because of lack of childcare. And 54% of working mothers felt they could not give 100% to their job. Now, there are a lot of data available talking about how women staying at home, taking care of children, and or taking care of relatives who are older, spouses, their mothers, cannot do full-time job because they can't give full-time attention. So let's look at who the unpaid caregivers are. Next slide, please. Excuse me. Family caregivers are responsibilities before COVID-19 largely fell on women. We know that. 1 in 10 women now report that they have new caregiving responsibilities as a result of COVID-19. So imagine that if you were taking care of your mother who is still living independently, but you need to check on her maybe 2 or 3 times a week. Now your 2 children are staying home and going to school on the internet, but you still have to check on your mother, and your responsibilities have accelerated. 60% of the 34.2 million Americans who provide unpaid care to a relative or friend over age 50 are older women. That's 1 in 4 households. So we have, well, let me do the next slide. 65.8% of women with children under age 6 were in the labor force in 2020. 75.4% of those whose youngest child was age 6 to 17. In other words, a lot of working women have children who are under age 17. A lot of those women had to leave the labor force because they needed to be home to watch over those children, to be sure that they were in class on their screens. So we have 2 distinct and sometimes overlapping populations of caregivers already, but then COVID upped the ante. So my next slide, please. The long-term financial impact of caregiving compounded by COVID-19. The economy has always been hard on women. We know that. Again, if you look back at, or you think back to my first slide, which was women earn less, they take more time away from work, and they do more part-time work because of caregiving. Because of all of these things, they have less in savings and pensions. They have a tendency to live alone in retirement because they have to, sometimes by choice, but often because their spouse is deceased, and they're living longer. So COVID-19 has compounded this. Job loss or reduction in hours has an immediate financial impact. If you not only cannot do your job, but you lose your job, you don't have a job to go back to, or your reduction in hours means that you are no longer eligible to contribute to the 401k, or you are no longer eligible to participate in your employer's healthcare plan, that has an immediate impact. long term, and one of the things that WISER really focuses on is the long-term impact that these issues that happen to you now have on when you go to retire. A reduction in savings and investments now means that you have less to live on when you retire, that you are going to depend on Social Security. But remember, if you are out of the labor force, that is a period of time that you are not contributing to Social Security, and that can have an impact on the amount of your Social Security benefit. You also, when you are out of the labor force or you have a reduction in hours, you have lost opportunities for pensions or compound returns on your savings plans, or you may lose your 401k match dollars if you're lucky enough to be in a situation that provides you a 401k. Something also that we have been noticing is that home purchase is a real issue, and it hasn't been brought to the fore until now, or at least I haven't seen as much emphasis on it, which is that purchasing a home is not just something that you say, whew, now I can purchase a home, but it is also a legacy to your children. It is a financial legacy. So if you're lucky enough to have had parents that had a home, that can be a financial legacy to you, or at least it can be a purchase into a CCRC, a continuing care retirement community, or long-term care. So this is very important. The inability to purchase a home or to finance home improvements. Now I'm going to sneak in, I was given a limit of 4 slides, but I'm going to sneak in a little extra information here because I think it's important to know, which is that women are disproportionately working in low-wage jobs, and that affects, again, the long-term stability, women's financial stability. And nearly half of working women, 46%, worked in jobs paying low wages, and the median dollar amount was $10.93 an hour. Now, a good friend of mine who is a mathematician and statistician by trade says that is a very squeezy number. And indeed it is squeezy, but at least it gives you something to grab onto. And I noticed here at the bottom of my screen, someone put up, and loss in financial, having your monthly salary also will have an impact on your ability to pay for childcare. And who are these low-wage women? And here's where women of color really take a hit. 54% of African American women are in those low-wage jobs, 64% of Hispanic or Latina women, whereas it's 40% of white women. And 40%, by the way, is not a low number. It's just that women of color have a higher percentage of them are working in low-wage jobs, and 37% of men. So I think it's important, and particularly as we move forward in talking and thinking about caregiving, that we look carefully at ways that we can improve caregiving opportunities, certainly, but also the general economic status of women, so that in the long term, when women go to leave the labor force, that they are secure and not just dependent on the thing that we're all dependent on for a good financial base, Social Security. So I guess I should leave it there. I sneaked in a 5th slide. Thank you very much. There is a thank you slide. Justine, is that there, that last slide that has our, no, that was I guess my first slide and last slide, my cover slides got taken out. So let me give this to you. If you just Google wiserwomen.org, we will come up. You can also like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. And I'm sure we can put those addresses up for your reference later on. But I do recommend for good, and this is not just for people who don't know anything. It's for people who do, and look, and it'll give you some more things to think about and understand about your pension and savings and investments. So I'm ready for questions. Not that I can answer them all, but I'll do my best.
Thank you, Laurel. We are going to open the floor up for questions for either Laurel and or Donna.
Hey, I guess I'll go first. It's Rob Goldstein from Biogen. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
For both of you, I'm struck by, we're learning a lot about how to get the word out and work and gather data through the current pandemic. But I think one of the messages that is right below the surface is that this pandemic is the tip of the iceberg in training society on how to interact with healthcare in a very different way. So I was just curious about, looking at the really great marketing that we've done to encourage people to get this vaccine, and looking at the data that you just presented, like how can we be thinking about a long-term strategy and kind of changing behaviors in the long term and not letting this just kind of be a flash in the pan? And I'll take my answer off camera.
Donna, you're working on the front end stuff.
We're working on front end, but we're also, as you just suggested, it's Bob, right?
Yeah, Bob.
We're already planning for what comes next, because you're right. It's not a flash in the pan. I think that we cannot look at this last 14 months and just say, okay, once everybody's got a vaccine, and we reopen and no more masks and whatever, that we just forget about this and go away. That can't happen. So there are already folks out there who are beginning planning, looking toward the future, and to say, never again. How are we going to ensure that families are prepared? Well, let me start with the big picture. That our government is prepared. That there are stockpiles of needed vaccine and PPE and all of these things that we know we should have known, right? About 120 years each time there's going to be a pandemic. But I always say to people, it's a lot more than that. We have watched over the last few years as we've had more hurricanes, wildfires, earthquakes, floods, and ice storms, and what have you. These are all events that happen in all parts of our country on a regular basis. Are we prepared? Do we know how we will support families through these? Do we know how we will support people with intellectual developmental disabilities through this? Do we know how we will support caregivers through this? We have not done a good job. We've only just begun to figure some of those things out. I was in a conversation, it was pre-pandemic, so whenever that was, with some caregivers who were managing people with intellectual and developmental disabilities in the wildfires that happened in Paradise, California. I will never forget the photos, those slides, and the stories that I heard. And never will I, be able to forget just how amazing these caregivers were in that moment when they were getting phone calls from their own families and their schools, their kids' schools or daycares about needing to evacuate. But they also had their duty to those who they were giving care to and to support all of them, and recognizing what few resources that they had and how ill prepared for something like that they were. So lots of stories and a long way around to say about that. I think that now is the time that, even as we are still in the middle of this pandemic and needing to do a lot more to support families and caregivers and individuals with disabilities or whatever their needs are for caregiving, we have to be preparing for the future and looking at how we do things differently, you know, starting with the education, with the medications and stockpiles, and being prepared, making sure that all the right people are sitting on the right committees in their states and localities throughout the year, so that when, not if, but when things happen and things go south, we are ready and we are there to support families.
And can I step in then and come in right underneath what you have to say with the support for that? And I think when you take it, come to the financial side and say, we have to have financial education and we need to start it early. Now, that is not going to solve the world's problems, but if we have people understanding. I did a seminar. I keep telling people this. I want to grab them by the shirt fronts. I did an hour-long seminar on caregiving and how to respond and things to do and suggestions and that. And I actually had a woman, this is U.S. Department of Agriculture, and we had more than 100 people on the call. I had a woman in tears saying to me, I didn't know that. Nobody ever told me that. And it was simple things like, don't just say, oh my God, I've got to take care of my mother. I'm going to quit my job and fly to Minnesota and do that. Because what happens then is, you haven't thought, but you've lost your health care more than likely if you had a full-time job. You've lost your pension, you've lost your savings, you're not contributing to Social Security, and there you are taking care of your mother, and that's great, but what are you going to do 15 or 20 years from now when it's time for you to retire? So let's back up, and now you need to care for your mother. What are the discussions that you need to have? Is there a way that you can work enough hours a week that you can maintain your health insurance? Is there a way? Can you commute? Can you? To talk about these things in the silo of caregiving, but also then let's talk about in high school about, hey, do you really need that second pair of, I don't know, Nikes? And let's follow one of these investments. Let's take a flyer and do an investment. And as your mother or your father or your aunt, I do this for graduation gifts. I give kids $200 and I get my financial advisor to sit down with them for an hour and invest that $200. And they can watch it lower, they can watch it come up, they can watch it do, and it gives them an idea. And when the money grows, I tell you, nothing like a high school student who's just made $25, you know. So those kinds of things I think are extremely important to give a base of education. The second, and I think this is just fundamental to American retirement and financing, and that's Social Security. And I hear people saying Social Security is going broke and it's not going to be there and dumpty dumpty dump, which means they don't understand the principle, or they don't care to understand the principle of Social Security, which is unless everyone, I love it, it takes a village. Thank you. Yes, it does. Every worker is contributing to the system. So unless every one of us dies of COVID, apropos of Donna, let's get those shots out there and give everybody a shot. there will be money coming into the Social Security system. Now, if we don't do something about stabilizing it, benefits will be cut back to about 75% of what is promised now. But I guarantee you, I'm old, having been around for the 83 amendments, Social Security benefits were going to be cut as of the month of July, when the 83 commission and then the legislation happened. Nobody wants Social Security to go down, but we really need to talk about that. So I guess my message is, Bob, in a long roundabout way, number one is financial education, and obviously health education comes right in on that, and how you take care of yourself. And then for me, the base of financial stability is Social Security. And I love this. We need to get more women jobs that can be done remotely, so that if they have to do that, and those are all building blocks on top of those two pillars, if you will. I will now step off of my soapbox.
But Laurel, that is so important and impactful what you said. I think is, as women, and maybe depends on what generation you're of, but how many of us women were told early on, how to prepare for the future? How do you save money? How do you invest money? I love what you're doing with your $200. What a great gift, right? But most of us think that that's only for like wealthy people, right? And it's not. We have to learn from the very first day that we get a job how to start saving money for our future. And sometimes that means taking a little risk or whatnot, but most women are never educated about how to do that. And that's a problem.
Yeah. And now I'm doing some continuing education at Virginia Tech, where I went to school, and for my graduate degrees. It was great. And now I get to go back and visit. And one of the things that's so interesting I'm hearing from older women is that, oh, my husband does that. I thought we were done with that. Well, we're not. A whole lot of women haven't got a clue. And if he happens to be hit by a bus tomorrow, which is not outside of the realm of possibility in the District of Columbia, she's going to be in deep trouble. And so at the very least, I say, at tax time, sit down with your husband and go over everything. And if you as the wife are taking care of the finances, which is not unheard of these days, sit down with your husband. And it would even be better if you did it once a month. But once at tax time is a great time, and you can be horrified by how much the government is taking away from you. And then you say, oh, wait a minute, I must be making enough money to have to pay taxes. That's really a good thing. So, and my pothole got filled out in front of my house, so that my county taxes, I guess that's a good thing. But however you look at it, this education deal is so important, and for everybody. Soapbox again, sorry. I'm really, this is my stuff.
Thank you, Laurel and Donna. I want to give a huge shout out to Laurel and Donna for great discussion today. And thank you everyone for coming. This does wrap up our allotted time. We will be sharing the recording and the slides with everyone after. So thank you very much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
It was a pleasure. Please come and visit our website. Get your shots. I'm inspired, Don. I'll tell everybody that hasn't.
Great to meet you, Laurel.
See ya. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.